Welcome back to another lecture. Our subject today is Prichard Colón Melendez, and through his story we will examine how rules, medicine, and ethics intersect inside a boxing ring. I am Alexei, and we will proceed carefully because the facts are sobering and the implications are broad.
Hello, I am Priyanka, and I work as Professor Alexei's teaching assistant. I will ask the obvious questions, and maybe one or two that are less obvious.
Let's begin with the structural overview. Prichard Colón Melendez, often known publicly as Prichard Colón, was a rising Puerto Rican boxing prospect. Born in Maitland, Florida in 1992, he moved to Puerto Rico at age 10 to compete for the island, and by 2015 he was 16-0 and widely regarded as a future contender. His case is significant because it illuminates, with tragic clarity, what happens when illegal strikes, uneven officiating, and pressured medical judgments converge in a sport where milliseconds matter.
Before we get lost in details, can we define a few terms in plain language so everyone is on the same page?
Of course, a rabbit punch is a hit to the back of the head or neck. It is illegal because it can damage the brain and spinal cord. A subdural hematoma is bleeding on the surface of the brain under its outer covering. The pooled blood increases pressure and can be rapidly life-threatening. A persistent vegetative state describes wakefulness without awareness. The eyes may open and there may be sleep and wake cycles, but there is no purposeful communication or behavior. Technically, if you will, a rabbit punch delivers rotational acceleration to the head, which shears bridging veins and risks subdural hemorrhage. A subdural hematoma with midline shift, such as the 1.2 centimeter shift documented in Colón's case, indicates substantial intracranial pressure and impending herniation risk. Neurosurgeons respond with emergent decompression, often a hemicraniectomy. A persistent vegetative state in the neurological taxonomy entails preserved autonomic and brainstem function, with severely impaired cortical integration. We observe reflexive responses, but no consistent command following that would evidence awareness.
So, in simpler terms, illegal shots to the back of the head can tear veins. The bleeding squeezes the brain. Doctors sometimes remove part of the skull to relieve pressure, and recovery of normal awareness after that level of injury is very rare.
Precisely. Moving forward, why does this matter beyond one tragic night? Colón's case is a lens on combat sports safety. It stresses that rules against dangerous strikes must be enforced in real time, and that ringside medicine must treat dizziness and similar symptoms as red flags, not mere inconveniences. The stakes are regulatory: better officiating protocols, clearer medical stop criteria, and accountability mechanisms can reduce catastrophic risk without altering the identity of the sport.
It also reflects patterns we see across sports. Historically, there were gaps in how concussions and head trauma were recognized, and the default was to, shake it off. In boxing, that cultural habit can be fatal.
On to our next point, a brief history. Colón's nickname was Dig It, coined at Puerto Rico's Albergue Olímpico as a nod to his lanky reach and his style of, as it were, digging in with long shots. He was American-born, yet Puerto Rican by sporting identity. His father moved him to Orocovis so he could come up through the island system. He won gold at the 2010 Pan American Youth Championship at 64 kilograms, attempted to qualify for the 2012 Olympics, but fell short to Gabriel Maestre, and then turned professional with a deep amateur record of 170-15.
He balanced studies in business administration in San Juan with a very busy start as a pro. 5 fights in 2013 and 7 in 2014. By early September 2015, he stopped former title challenger Vivian Harris in Toronto. which made his 16-0 look like momentum with a capital M.
Then came October 2015, Fairfax, Virginia. Colón versus Terrell Williams was added late to the card after Andre Dirrell withdrew from a different bout against Blake Caparello. Throughout 9 rounds, Colón repeatedly complained of rabbit punches. The referee, Joseph Cooper, reportedly told him, "You take care of it." This is the precise opposite of the referee's mandate to neutralize fouls. Colón, for his part, was penalized 2 points for a low blow, and he suffered the first knockdown of his professional career in the 9th.
Between rounds, he told the ringside physician, Dr. Richard Ashby, that he felt dizzy, but he was cleared to continue, with the expectation he would shake it off. Then, his corner mistakenly removed his gloves, thinking the fight had ended, and he was disqualified on a corner retirement. Moments later, he was incoherent and dizzy. His mother helped him to the dressing room. He vomited and collapsed, and an ambulance took him to Inova Fairfax Hospital.
Imaging revealed a left-sided subdural hematoma, approximately 1.5 centimeters in diameter, with 1.2 centimeters of midline shift. Neurosurgeons performed an emergency hemicraniectomy. Colón remained in a coma for 221 days, and then in a persistent vegetative state. He did not regain speech. He later lived at his mother's home in Orlando, received physiotherapy, and could sometimes respond to verbal commands and interact via a computer interface. In 2017, his parents filed a lawsuit seeking more than $50 million against the ringside doctor and match organizers. As of 2025, it had never gone to trial. In 2026, his father announced Prichard's death at age 33. Along the way, public backlash against Williams was intense. By 2026, most of his social media presence was deleted. Colón was also named an honorary WBC world champion, a symbolic recognition, not a bout result. A personal note: officiating in combat sports is not a self-service buffet. It is closer to being a lifeguard than a scorekeeper. The primary job is to prevent foreseeable harm through prompt and impartial enforcement. When we as a community accept anything less, we make catastrophic outcomes more probable than they need to be. Let's transition to another aspect. 3 big questions to organize our thinking, namely a historical question about enforcement of illegal strikes, a counterfactual question about event reshuffling, and a present-day question about legal accountability that remains unresolved.
Professor, what were the historical responses to illegal strikes like rabbit punches in boxing? Were they always treated as serious, or did practice lag behind the rules?
It's important to understand that under the Marquess of Queensberry Conventions and their successors, fouls to the back of the head have long been prohibited. The rationale is anatomical vulnerability, not aesthetics. Historically, enforcement has varied with culture, venue, and referee training. The written rule was clear, yet application could be lenient in rough infighting or in markets that valorize toughness. Modern protocols empower the referee to issue a clear verbal warning, halt the action, deduct points, or disqualify. These steps exist to deter repetition before damage accumulates. In Colón's bout, the asymmetry is glaring. Persistent complaints about rabbit punches did not lead to meaningful deterrence, while a low blow produced a 2-point deduction. That imbalance modulates fighter behavior. It rewards the offender, provokes retaliation, and increases exposure to the very angles where illegal shots land. In simpler terms, the safety valve failed to open, pressure built, and the system ruptured.
And how are referees typically trained to handle this? If a fighter turns and complains repeatedly, what should happen in the ring, step by step?
Standard practice is straightforward. First, on the initial instance, call time if needed. Relocate the fighters to center. Issue a loud, unambiguous warning specifying the foul. Second, adjust ring geography by repositioning yourself to see behind the shoulders during clinches. Proactively break clinches where heads are misaligned. Third, if the behavior persists, deduct a point promptly. Do not wait for cumulative damage to force your hand. Fourth, if repetition continues or intent is clear, disqualify. The referee is the guarantor, not an auditor after the fact. Additionally, if a fighter reports dizziness or shows ataxia, call time and summon the physician for immediate evaluation. There is no virtue in speed over safety. In Colón's case, we observe from credible reports a minimization of the complaint. You take care of it, which effectively delegated rule enforcement to the aggrieved fighter. That response is, arguably, a categorical error.
So yeah, moving on. What if Colón had not been added to that October card after Andre Durrell withdrew? How might his career have looked without that one late substitution?
Counterfactuals must be handled with humility. We can infer some contours. At 16-0, fresh off a stoppage of a former title challenger, the likeliest trajectory was a sequence of step-up bouts, perhaps one or two durable veterans, then a ranking fight. His activity pattern was aggressive. 5 fights in 2013, 7 in 2014, and 2 significant contests a month apart in 2015. Had the October undercard slot not materialized, he might have had a longer recovery interval from both training and the Harris bout, and therefore less cumulative subconcussive load, and a camp with more predictable logistics. None of this guarantees safety, but risk is multiplicative. Fewer stressors reduce probability mass in the tail, where catastrophic outcomes live. In short, without that reshuffle, the modal outcome would have been continued progression. The tragedy is not inevitable, it is contingent.
What other factors typically shape a fighter's arc beyond that one night? I'm thinking about matchmaking, training loads, even how tough sparring is day to day.
Indeed. We consider the intensity and frequency of sparring, the quality of defensive coaching, weight-cutting stress, the cadence of fights, the stability of promotion and management, and crucially, the reliability of officiating and medical oversight. Early career scheduling is a double-edged sword. Colón's 12 fights in 2 calendar years built skill and visibility, yet they also demanded high training volume. Add the compressed 2015 schedule, Harris in early September and Williams in mid-October, and we see limited neurological recovery windows. Even absent a diagnosed concussion, subconcussive exposure accumulates. Best practice is to modulate load, especially after a high-contact bout. Finally, systemic factors matter. Late event additions can compress pre-bout briefings and stress logistics, which is precisely when vigilance should tighten, not loosen.
Professor, why hasn't Colón's lawsuit reached a conclusion? It was filed in 2017 and, as of 2025, still had not been brought to trial.
Several layers of complexity intervene. First, sports are inherently risky. Defendants argue assumption of risk, while plaintiffs must establish a breach of a specific duty of care. For example, a failure to follow medically reasonable protocols when a fighter reports dizziness. Second, causation is multifactorial. When refereeing, corner decisions and medical judgments intersect, attributing proximate cause to any single actor is contested. Third, multiple defendants and insurers produce procedural inertia. Motions, discovery disputes, and expert testimony battles lengthen timelines. Fourth, commissions and promoters may operate across jurisdictions. Venue and governing law questions add friction. The net effect is delay. Meanwhile, the family shoulders financial and emotional burdens without closure.
And what does that mean for rules today? If cases stay unresolved, do sports actually change anything?
Regulatory progress need not wait on verdicts. Clearer standards can be codified now. For example, automatic timeouts and formal warnings for any single strike to the back of the head. Rapid point deductions for repetition. Explicit authority and obligation for ringside physicians to halt a bout when a fighter reports dizziness or shows disequilibrium, and post-bout audits for any contest with repeated fouls or neurological symptoms. Data collection is essential. Commissions should track fouls, medical stoppages, and outcomes to refine protocols empirically. Finally, training must be standardized. Referees need recurrent simulation-based drills for foul management and concussion recognition. This is not about erasing risk. It is about moving probability away from catastrophe while preserving the integrity of competition.
It makes you wonder, culturally, could we also shift expectations so that stopping a fight for dizziness is seen as professional rather than, soft?
Yes, language shapes norms. In this context, discretion should be valorized. We can celebrate fighters and teams for choosing safety under uncertainty. In conclusion, prudence is courage redirected toward the future rather than confined to the present round. To summarize, Prichard Colón Melendez was a gifted Puerto Rican prospect whose career and life were transformed by a night marked by illegal rabbit punches, uneven rule enforcement, and a catastrophic subdural hematoma. We examined 3 questions: the historical enforcement of fouls and where it failed, how a single late card addition and compressed scheduling plausibly altered his trajectory, and why legal accountability in such cases remains complex and unresolved. For further study, consider the biomechanics of traumatic brain injury in sports, second impact risk across contact disciplines, and best practices for ringside medical protocols and referee training. Thank you for listening. Engage with the material, and as always, test the rules we live by against the outcomes they produce.
Thank you, Professor. That was helpful to think through, actually.